Qualitative analysis, language, meaning, words. Um, First of all, the stuff that was done on locating and evaluating sources was outstanding, consistent, good, interesting. Um, you know, uh, Only one or two were a little light. If you looked, I actually think you should take a while and skim through the whole discussion thread and see what other people did and where you can pick up and collaboratively learn from one another. We're going to come back to this one later because I've picked this for a particular purpose. Um, Table, excellent. Things that scored badly. Source one scored badly. What was this one? James Melville on Twitter. Yes. Somebody else looked at Twitter. Several other people looked at Twitter tweets or Twitter things as a source. One person looked at a tweet as a source and read all the other, well, some of the person's other tweets to determine what their bias was, which was good. Somebody used the Twitter feed of Jair Bolsonaro, the Brazilian president, which, as that person pointed out rightly, is not a very reliable source. But if you're doing contemporary political research on this topic, that is one of a number of Twitter feeds that provides insights into a particular point of view. So it is not reliable or objective, but it is useful for research. And I'm glad to see that somebody picked up one of those and put it out there and said, we might have a go at this. So that was good. There's many other ones here. Somebody noted the search terms they used, which is good. And they used different search terms in different parts of the search, which is good. Somebody else used dates creatively to search back as far as the SARS pandemic. So these are all things that people did in this exercise which were good and useful. And people did a variety of things, and they found there's somebody else who looked at a tweet. Again, more of a political opinion. Several tweets, actually. In terms of who these people are, a lot of these tweets are using graphics, which is another thing, of course. How to lie with statistics and how to present graphs in such a way. So there's a broad range of things that you've done there, which is good and useful. And I'm trying to put a timer on myself so this video doesn't go on for ages. It's an exercise that everybody should do at least once in their academic career. It's good for you, right? Like taking your vitamins and eating your vegetables, okay? So what I want to do now, the next stage of this is, having found stuff, I want to think about how we look at the arguments in it. So I didn't update the cover slide. I did, as you will see, update the slide which reminds you of the assessment. And I did leave the snow days slide in there. This was the part of the year normally when I would be telling people not to worry about snow days because the stuff will be on Canvas. Of course, sometimes if Canvas is having a bad day, you just have to accept that it's not running very quickly. So we're moving through the first two stages here in our look at qualitative research on how we do research and analysis on qualitative materials. And one of the key things that we're going to do, we're going to look at methods of annotation for reading this week and reverse engineering arguments. And that will take us eventually to how we encode arguments for research. We won't get to the writing part. What we do in the humanities and in qualitative research generally is that we take collections of facts, we assemble them into things that look like they have a relationship together, that explain something, and we build an argument out of that. So this is very traditional humanities and qualitative research, grounded theory, where the theory emerges from this wonderfully archaic parchment through the notes to an interpretation. And that, of course, is how we construct arguments, and we can now deconstruct arguments and map them. And we can use digital tools to map arguments and make the argument structure visible. And this week we're going to look at doing it within a single article. And then next we're going to look at doing it across a range of articles. So this is a classic paragraph of history, but it applies to any humanities discipline, any discipline that takes a qualitative approach to knowledge. And it begins with an assertion, a statement, an interpretation, an argument. And then it lines up three pieces of evidence. It's a beautiful paragraph. to support that argument, right? And if that argument was well founded, you could take those 3 pieces of evidence, you could dump them, and you'd find 3 other pieces of evidence that would support it very well. If those are the only 3 pieces of evidence in the world that support that argument, then it's not a very strong argument. But when you're reading, what you need to be reading for is argument. You want to see what the argument is, and then, of course, ask, does the evidence support it? And the small image here is a mind map from 2005 of actually that article, where the main points of interpretation about the military revolution are the 6 main key branches. So you can immediately see what the big points in the article are, and then the pieces of evidence that support them are spread out at the lower levels. They are relegated to the lower levels. So it's a visual structuring of the argument, which is becoming increasingly important and common. This is where I did the process, where I mapped up an article by Tom Bartlett on the Irish War of Independence on my iPad. The tools for doing this sort of stuff on mobile devices are generally better now than on desktops. User interface design on mobile devices is somewhat ahead of traditional desktop tools. And this is a mind map of the article. So the main sections, it's a descriptive narrative. So he talks about the stages of the war and what happened in the different stages. And so again, so the main stages are the top level, the big branches of the mind map, and the specific incidents that are in those are the lower level. So he's looking at the pattern of events and grouping it into phases. This is someone who, 2015, in the first year in the digital humanities degree, this was someone who went from installing the mind mapping tool for the first time to producing this in about 2 hours. Now, this was and still is one of the best people. But every year, students, particularly if you've had any previous experience of mind mapping or if you have a natural inclination for visual thinking, can achieve this sort of result in about 2 hours, right? It's doable. And the thing is not, so you should try and set aside 2 hours for doing this, and I explicitly say that in the discussion thread, because we're not looking for perfection here. And you can come back and we will review it again and look at it again when we look at the literature review going forward. So the object of the exercise here is not to spend half a day struggling with something new. The object is to see how quickly you can get to grips with it, or how far you can get in a limited amount of time, and does it work for you? And for some of you it will, and it'll be useful. The advantages, some of the advantages, of course, is that you can copy and paste and move stuff from one mind mapping tool or one mind map to another, so you can refactor things. This is actually both the foreign and domestic policy of Frederick the Great grouped from one, and this is one is the domestic and one is the foreign, and the background is an outline for a totally different lecture where I needed to draw these 2 things together and reuse them. So I already had them as mind maps, so it was grab that, paste it together, boom, there you are, 1 page, there's the outline for the thing I need to do. And that will lead us on to mapping debates, where there are different points of view on a topic, and we will look at how those evolve over time. But first of all, we're going to look at how it works in an article. So in the topic, in the discussion topic, what I have asked you to do is highlight a page or 2. What we've got here is this video will be in here at the top. We have the PowerPoint. There is the discussion. There's an old video from last year covering the same material if you want it. There's a video on using Google Docs to annotate documents. There's an article that I annotated, highlighted, and then did a mind map of. I hope those are both still properly linked. There's a reading on mind mapping that you might find useful. There's a really old video on mind mapping. So there's several different steps, several different videos taking you through the steps of this process in different ways to help you get it right. But in the discussion, what I'm asking you to do is take a reading, an academic reading, and highlight it. Go through and do the process of highlighting it. Use different colors for argument, for evidence, for interpretation, for things that are questionable. I suggest that you do at least 3 pages. to get the mechanics of it right, and think about what is your system for color coding different elements of the argument, right? Be thoughtful about that. Again, it's something you can improve on in the future. And then mind map at least some of the article, as much of it as you can. Academic articles, if they're well written, will be properly organized with headings. It will be easy or easier than opinion pieces or speeches or things from the Daily Mail, which have not necessarily got any argument or any structure. And so pick a mind mapping tool, and I list 3 free ones there that you can use. Download them, install them, work out how you can get a copy, an image out. All of them have tools to export an image of the map. Okay, and basically share an image of a page of your annotated text. And the target here is that when I look at the highlighting, it should be obvious to me what the different colors are for without having to have it explained. There should be some system, and usually I can figure it out from the colors, and an image of the mind map. If Canvas is slow, you may want to put them in 2 different posts, because sometimes, and I know in other classes this year, people have had problems with a post with multiple images is too big and it won't upload. So that's what you'll do. Now let me explain here. This is part of the whole process. So this is that article I referred to from that somebody found about. It's actually, as I turned out in reading through it, it's actually the introduction to a special issue of Policy and Society, which is a great journal for people interested in public policy. So it's a collection of essays, and therefore it's. But the thing about this is, of course, that it has paragraphs that are well organized and well written. So where am I going? I am going to here. This was something that I did. Hold on. Let me just bring this back onto this desktop. So this was one that I did earlier for a different topic. It was actually an article about evaluation of sources, and I demonstrated how to evaluate sources by how to mind map articles by mind mapping the article about evaluation of sources. It's kind of meta, right? But here we go. So this is Simple Mind Pro. With Simple Mind Free, we'll do the same thing really, and we'll pick a blank one. Boom. Repeat the timer. And oh dear, again, organizing your files. I have a folder for teaching. I have a folder for PO 2001. I have a folder for this year, and I will not call it New Mind Map. I will call it Mind Mapping. Right, so, and what I will do, bit of hopping between screens here, is, so I will actually take this. I could take the whole thing and I'll hop in here and I will actually make this the title of the mind map. Bump. Boom. There we go. Right. It's a little bit big. Alt tab. Okay. So I could put the full reference in there, but I don't want to. The abstract, that's the abstract. We don't want the abstract. Pandemics are a difficult policy problem. Okay. Right. So they're saying it's a difficult policy problem, and I'm guessing this is how I add a subtopic. Difficult policy problem, right? And I'm guessing that in this paragraph, they're going to say why it's a difficult policy problem. This is especially true. Okay, so knowledge about the nature of the problems. Knowledge. Okay, that's a big sentence. It would probably be better to type this, but what I'm going to do, bear in mind that this is, something that supports this argument. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste that in, and I'm actually going to, because there's too many words there. Knowledge. So I'm just going to delete all those words. Knowledge inadequate at the outset. Go back to here. So that's that point. Boom, 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 boom. Knowledge about, and in fact, this is actually now knowledge about, see, what's happening here is the way, if you look at the way the structure of this argument goes, okay, this is actually, these are the things that knowledge was inadequate about. Knowledge about the disease, knowledge about potential solutions. So this is a thing that explains this. Okay, disease, this was quite different from many other cases. So this paragraph kind of has two separate halves to it, different to many other crises, because this, in terms of the argument, exists at the same level as this. So it's a paragraph of two halves. This is one half of the paragraph. This is the other half of the paragraph. Is that right? No. Yes, it is. So we're breaking down the visual structure of the paragraph, and I'm probably taking it apart in more detail than most of the body paragraphs would allow you to take apart, because it is an early paragraph. So it is summarizing a lot of argument. Let's just have a go. Just for pure pig iron, let's just rattle down here and determine the exact policy. Let's go down into a body paragraph down in there. Here's one. Right. Now, okay, the second issue. What's the first issue? With respect to the first issue, review inventories of policy tools. So the first thing, right, so this is a paragraph somewhere else down there. Review inventories of policy tools. Boom, 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 boom. Papers, review inventory of policy tools. The issue features detailed case studies. Okay. So, oh, wait a minute. I've made a mistake. I need a higher level here, but you can see what I'm doing. Right, I could have done this better. First issue, right. Review inventories of policy tools, detailed case studies, specific countries. Oh, here we go, right. So so case studies, look at this. So under case studies, detailed case studies, we have, on the one hand, the case studies in China and Italy, and on the other hand, case studies in Singapore and Israel. Oh, we have many countries, sets of different case studies, right? And I remember the other one. Countries with less successful responses, the United States and Sweden. Yes, so in fact what they've got here is, the structure of this argument is they're going to look at a whole load of these, and they've already categorized these case studies in terms of their success, or what the different types of case studies are. Just out of curiosity, what's the, as well as several others which prove reasonably successful. Okay, so they've actually, what they've done in this article, one of the things that they've done is they've already grouped the responses into 4 areas. And at some point, presumably farther down, they will talk in more detail about the different responses. So if you recall from the PowerPoint, the image where we had, the original nice piece of historical text, and then the little card index notes where people had taken the card index notes from the different places, and they've made their 4 piles out of those notes on the basis of different types of response. So at some point in the body of the article, there will be discussions which will be children of these 4 categories, which will explain what the salient points of these 4 categories, these 4 types of response are, right? And so establishing this structure allows you then to, go to that part of the article and go, right, we're going to hang those pieces of evidence off these. So we're going to reorganize, dismantle the structure of the argument and the evidence and how it's lined up. And of course, if you were using the argument mapping, they will make an interpretation that some were sort of, for instance, they say that Singapore and Israel were successful. So they will have a range of pieces of evidence which will support. So they will have evidence. I'm not going to look for them, right? Which will support that. And you could, if you were actually to use the formal language of argument mapping, you could actually label the branches. Oops, to show which things support the conclusion that they're making. And if there's a but on one of their pieces of evidence, then you could have contradicts. So you could actually take apart and remap their argument like that. And then, of course, if you were looking for practices which led to an effective coronavirus approach or an unsuccessful, so you'd have all these pieces of evidence lined up here, and you actually wanted to do a separate categorization of good and bad planning practices. So you were going to try and write an essay about what are good and bad planning practices for the pandemic. So you could actually take these and go, right, well, this is good, so we'll put that with the good ones. And this is good, so we'll put that with the good ones. You could also copy it, right? And this is bad, so we'll put that with the bad things to do. And you can restructure the stuff. Now, of course, as I've dragged it there, I've destroyed the original thing, put them back. The other thing, of course, is so it would possibly be better to copy and paste this as a child of this. The other thing, of course, to notice is that mind maps are color-coded. And if you take something that's a child of one node and you drag it and attach it to another node, it inherits the color code of the parent. And it will probably not surprise you to discover, if I can remember which icon does this, that you can, which is the pretty picture one in the desktop, add image topic properties. This may be it. No. Oh, wait a minute. It's up here. Sorry. You can actually, not that one, that one. You can decide to pick a color for a topic. Oh, look at that. And you can apply particular colors. Okay, that's not very good. Let's go with good because we're doing good. And then let's go down here to bad. And let's make the bad practices. These are the bad things to do. So you can actually then recode the colors on most mind maps to show different ways of structuring things, much in the same way as you can color code elements of your annotations. So you can come up with, and a lot of this in terms of the language you're using, and this goes back to the search terms you used. You can, as you refine a research project, you can develop a systematic set of color codes and tags for themes that run right through the project. And in some cases, these will only emerge as the project goes on, right? That's where grounded theory works, where the actual theory emerges from the data. And here we can see some stuff emerging from the data where we've just taken a look at a tiny paragraph of one article and we've worked out, what their argument is and how we break it down and then how we can rearrange it. And of course, the final thing that I will show you is, well, first of all, you can export this. Mind map, export, mind map, you can share it. But the other thing you can do is you can copy as an outline, right? And we've selected the top, so hopefully you've got the whole thing. And I will go back to here, and I will in fact go to Google, and I will go new, and I will go new doc. Come on, here we go, new Google Doc, untitled Google document, right? And remember, hopefully I selected the whole outline, and I will go paste. And I will, oh, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Oh, there it is, right. Yes, it did, it worked. Whew, look at that. Did you see what I did? Having mapped it and moved the mind map around and juggled the pieces and decided that I want this to belong to this, and I want this to belong to this, and this part is coming after that part, and then I can select the whole thing. Again, copy as outline. I rearranged it, and I can go back to the place where I have to write my essay, and I can paste it in. It hasn't actually rearranged it because it's maintained the structure, the sequence in which I created them, unfortunately. But that's an indented out, that's an essay plan. And I know some of you never plan essays, but if you're, got a research project to write to specification and schedule, or a book, then things like outlines and chapters and structure and organization is important. So the ability to do this is where it requires effort, right? So this requires effort. It requires you to do something new and original, and it gets you outside your comfort zone working with digital tools. But the payback of putting the effort in is that you can then do this, right? So this is why this is useful. And at some point, of course, the next thing we're going to do is do a literature review. And that, in many respects, is essentially a mind map of several articles across the spectrum of views. And if one of the output products you have to produce, which it is in this case, is a short 400 or 500 word literature review, then once you've got the map of the argument, it's very easy to go to the text that tells you the story, that turns that visual representation into a narrative story that you can tell people. And that is how humans make sense of stuff. We are essentially a species that makes sense of stuff by telling compelling stories. So, in part, qualitative research is an exercise in understanding and telling stories about information. And this is one way to do it. And it may be new to many of you, but it is fun. And it gives you an excuse to play with some tech toys, which is always good and useful. And it's a learning experience, and some of you will take to it like ducks to water, and others will decide that no, you've tried it, but it's not really for you. But at least you'll have tried. And that is the point of the exercise, to experiment. And in an experiment, there is no harm in getting a null result, because that in itself is a piece of information. Okay,